Good morning, HERA design team. How are you?
Very good. Good morning.
Good
Thank
morning.
you. You know what? Thank you so much for joining me on Designing Healthy Environments. This is going to be a lot of fun because for you watching out there, HERA design lab designers, they truly make forensic laboratory design fun, engaging, and of course, sustainable. So we're going to find out what their secrets are, what their approach is to sustainable design and specifically to forensic laboratories. Hello, my name is Alicia Ponce, and I am the founder and principal of AP Monarch. We are architects and sustainability consultants. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with three of my favorite lab designers. We have first Ken Moore, president of HERA. He leads the firm's forensic laboratory planning and design practice. Ken has successfully completed crime labs and medical examiner facilities around the world. And next we have laboratory designer Jinhee Lee. She believes, as do I, that you don't need to sacrifice form for function. Laboratories can be both beautiful and functional. And last but not least is Taisha Griffith, laboratory planner. Taisha has provided clients more than a decade of experience in architectural design and project management for a range of government, healthcare, and corporate laboratory projects. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
Great. So we have a great crowd. So Jinhee, would you like to share first of all about HERA? Can you tell us a little bit about HERA, who you are and where you are at?
Yeah, definitely. Good morning, Alicia, and thank you so very much for having us. I think we are very excited to be here to chat with you about what we love. Just to give you a little history about HERA, HERA is now certified MBE. We are a very small group of subject matter experts who has a deeper appreciation for science. And some of my colleagues have really transitioned from actually a science background. And across the board, we have been cross-pollinated to understand science language and how we transcribe it into architectural as well as the engineering language.
Very nice. Yeah, I remember when I first met Ken a couple of months ago, we were, you had told me a little bit about the history of HERA, and so very, very fascinating, and the work that you guys are doing. So what we are talking about today, so as architects and on my end, and we collaborate a lot, right? Especially when it comes to making a true sustainable project. I'm curious here, Jinhee, could you talk about some of the blind spots that, when it comes to laboratory design, when you're working with architects and engineers, what are these blind spots that you guys identify?
So when it comes to something like this, I can break it down and into pieces. But and I will just talk about what's really close to my heart. This journey, I believe it's really starts with right sizing the lab. And I know that we're struggling with trying to meet the budget and the program. And at the end of the day, it is the users, the scientists who are occupying this space. And without meeting their needs, design team actually fails, right? So how do we design that? That means that the lab planners like ourselves, as well as the architect and the whole design team has to work together as a holistic design. In matter of fact, way the I know that throughout the whole HERA, we like to design. One is holistic design, and then the second one is how do you meet the human factor, right? This idea of a human factor is actually not it's not new. I remember when I was growing up, my dad actually had a book called The Human Factor, and I think that was from 1970s. And we're just now looking at it really with the magnifying glass, right? And I know that in the office design, we have sort of a mastered and how do we make a comfort space for occupants, but we haven't really dived into that in a lab planning design. So working with the architects and working with the engineers, bringing these issues, then I think we can really accomplish aesthetically and functionally work together to design a holistic design. So.
No, that's great because, you know, when I think of a lab before, you know, any design, or if I talk to someone, you think about research, you think about maybe a room with no walls, yellow lighting, you know, because you're focused on the research, and a lot of great discoveries and research happen in labs. And it's wonderful that you guys are focusing, also adding that human factor, because if they're making this type of investigation, then, you know, I think it does make sense to add that human factor in there.
Right. So the reason, and also to note that, is that if you think about it, scientists are occupying the space 8 to 10 hours, just like the employees from the office spaces, right? Why not bringing the natural light into the space? I know that there are some limitations that we have to address from the science side, but that doesn't prevent us from bringing a natural quality of a life into the space and making it as functional and beautiful and aesthetically pleasing, so the user can feel comfortable using that space.
Yeah, it's always about arriving at that sweet spot.
Yes.
Right sizing. What is that? And you know, labs are also known as energy hogs. They have a reputation of being energy hogs. So I think that's a way of looking at labs differently and understanding the energy, what type of research is happening, what type of equipment we're specifying, right? So there's a sweet spot there too. Taisha, do you want to talk about your approach to that?
Yes. So like Jinhee said, and you said, right sizing is important when it comes with the lab energy hogs because of all the equipment that goes in the space. And so what we do is we work with the engineers, and they do their calculations for the HVAC so that they could have a comfortable environment. And we make the lab flexible and open so that they don't feel claustrophobic in there as well. Mm-hmm. And like Jinhee mentioned too, with the 8 to 10 hours that the scientists are in that space, so we have the air changes for the unoccupied spaces and the occupied spaces. The occupied spaces are the spaces that the researchers are in for 8 to 10 or even 12 hours. And that's the labs, and just like the offices. And then the unoccupied spaces are those that they're in for less than 8 hours. So that's like a storage room or a training room that they're in there for a short period of time.
So I'm curious, do you find yourselves maybe caught in the middle of architects wanting to make a project beautiful and functional, and engineers wanting to make it, functional and operational? Like, what is that experience like?
We work together as a team, and we come together.
Oh, you're so
with
nice.
everyone. Yes, and we make it work beautiful and functional. So we help each other out.
Yeah, no, it's a collaborative process, right?
Yes.
Yes. So Alicia, a piggyback on Taisha is that a lot of times the solution doesn't have to be very expensive, right? And I could speak in terms of my background and how I was raised, along with Taisha and Ken. We all had the same background, and growing up, we would stretch $1 into pieces, right?
Absolutely.
And we design our lab to meet that, but make it as beautiful as possible. You don't have to throw in this luxury finishes or anything like that, but also carefully study the chemical needs in the space, and apply an everyday material to make it as beautiful and functional. So that way, at the end of the day, engineers are happy with the design that they have. And then of course, the architect is happy with what they have. But I mean, truly and honestly, at the end of the day, it is the client who has to approve.
Yes,
the
but it's
design.
not about us. It's about who's using the
Exactly.
building at
That's
the end
right.
of the day, right? That's
Yes.
that's what we aim for.
That's right.
No, I love that. And I think that's the way that's another fun challenge to me, is to make it functional, beautiful, and cost effective, right? We want to be able to
Right.
bring those types of solutions to the client. And I feel like your wealth of experience, leads you to these options that are out there. My belief is that we have the tools and the resources, so why not use them, right? This is
That's
where
right.
innovation happens.
That's right.
Yeah, so let's talk about sustainability, and really you guys can go beyond platinum, right? It's not just about LEED. Just like you say, Jinhee, that you don't have to separate the two. Ken, do you want to talk about your sustainability approach in lab design?
Yeah, thanks, Alicia. I think our approach definitely is a holistic approach, where we're understanding the science and the function, the people, the expectations, the budget, the schedule. All of those things come into play when we're designing these, particularly forensic facilities, and being successful at designing them and meeting the sustainability goals and aspirations. And in today's word, I think sustainability is also evolving to not just be sustainable for the project and the built environment, but sustainable to you and me who need to work and live in that building.
Mhm.
And thinking about things like indoor air quality, access to natural light, access to a healthy work environment, even healthy food options being offered within these laboratory environments go well beyond the traditional word of sustainability. So we're taking that all into account. We had a project that had started during the midst of the recession back in 2006, 2008, and we're able to take advantage of some of the construction decreases that had occurred at that time. The project is just west of Kansas City, in Kansas, and there was an opportunity there to design a sustainable facility to meet silver, gold kind of levels. But because of the recession and the cost savings that were there, plus the environment that project was in, being located in, we actually were able to obtain a platinum level facility. And one of the ways that we do that is in our approach to design the building traditionally designed with traditional HVAC systems, traditional water service systems, providing natural gas, all these kinds of traditional things that you would find in a lab building. And then looking at ways, after modeling that, looking at ways that we can improve upon that modeling. So that platinum facility actually has a ground heat source heat pump that is the mechanical system. And what would have cost about 54% of the building's energy to feed a traditional HVAC system, we were actually able to reduce that to just shy of 15% of the energy usage in the building by utilizing photovoltaics and the ground source heat pump and things like that to go well above and beyond a traditional lab building to create the platinum facility. Other aspects of the building for the indoor air quality included providing ceiling fans to help move the air around so that the air wasn't going to be stagnant and still. We also helped on the sound issue side in these large office type spaces to apply some white noise into the space to help control the audible conditions. And then in the laboratory themselves, we actually provided a low flow fume hood, a high efficiency, low flow fume hood. And that saved a tremendous amount of air because, you know, once you're in the laboratory environment and to keep the air clean and fresh, you spend all that time in conditioning the air, putting it into the laboratory and then using it. And then you have to get rid of it. You have to throw it away. And that process is costly. And so with a high efficiency, low flow fume hood, we're actually able to use 3 fume hoods to every 1 traditional chemistry fume hood. So we're using the same amount of air, but now providing air for 3 hoods instead of just 1 hood, thereby reducing the overall amount of cooling and air conditioning and air treatment that has to happen before it enters the lab, and then we get rid of it.
And, you know, I see opportunities too in passive design too, where in forensic labs, where are the opportunities to identify those energy guzzling sides of the labs versus the lesser, lesser side, so that we can, you know, plan for those labs to be on, you know, on the north side and provide heat, right? The ones that create more heat can go on the north side. The ones that create less heat can go on the south side. Those are the passive design strategies that, you know, we're also working on right now. Can you talk a little bit about that, like those opportunities, additional opportunities that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So some of the additional opportunities, and it may not seem significant at the time, but one of the items is just hot water. You know, how much hot water do you have to generate? And you're constantly circulating hot water in the building when the reality is that the lab doesn't need that much hot water. So extracting the centralized hot water system and putting in place point of use hot water or InstaHot where it's needed is one of those solutions to reduce that energy consumption. I think another one is the kind of equipment. A lot of times we use equipment that generates a lot of heat, and that heat just is dissipated into the room. If we can put a point of use exhaust system located near that heat source, we can capture the heat and get rid of it where it's not desirable, that extra heat, and help reduce the amount of energy. And so that's with the use of a snorkel. You could also do water, recirculated water systems to cool refrigerators and freezers rather than letting them run on electricity and rely 100% of cooling that way. And then finally, water usage in the lab, you know, looking at like a steam sterilizer. A steam sterilizer uses a lot of water to create that jacketed steam environment for the sterilizer. If you were to replace that with a heat steam sterilizer, you would save, you know, hundreds of thousands of gallons of water that get utilized and wasted every day, you know, every year. Would be another savings for the lab.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because we also need to design for the life of the building, you know,
Exactly.
the life cycle, and what is that the O&M, operations and maintenance. So
Yeah.
wonderful.
Sure.
I just love the background that you all have. I mean, it really is an inviting laboratory. Um, I imagine this is a HERA project.
It is. It is. And it's a fairly successful one. It was opened in 2012. And so we did some things as well with providing monitors, in the building to illustrate how much water saving was happening so that the users of the building and the visitors could actually see the active energy savings that was going on, through monitor stations, and they could understand more about what LEED was. And this was a LEED version 3 at the time.
Okay.
That we were designing to. We've even included other things like caseload counts and the amount of samples that are being processed on a daily basis, so that the visitor to the building not only had a sense of what energy savings was happening, but actually what processes were occurring within the building, so that they could be educated not only on forensic science, but on building construction for these types of buildings.
Mm-hmm. Can you
So,
talk
Alicia,
about, yeah, go ahead.
just to piggyback on this project is that I believe that this is one of the point of where we did apply the human factor that we have discussed about, and then address the issue of bringing natural lighting, as you can see here, that connotation of what we believe in the 1950s of lab is no longer applied in today's design, with having that perception of addressing sustainability and how do we bring a quality of a life into spaces like this. So I believe this project actually launched on with that notion in it. So
Oh, very nice. And there's also now we're with the race on carbon, right, to reduce carbon or sequester it. I'm looking at the image, and one of the other things that we do is look at the embodied carbon in materials. Also, there's a delicate balance there. Can they perform well, right? You need a certain surface, countertop surface on laboratories. So we are definitely in the space of vetting materials to make sure that not only are they made with low to no toxins, but also what is their embodied carbon content in there. So we definitely want to keep that into mind. Lots of things to think about. Can any of you speak about maybe perhaps a challenge that you see often, and how you turn that around into an opportunity? Like what happened with that challenge in design, for lab design?
So I do think that, yes, it's a very challenging building type, right? As both Taisha and Jinhee mentioned, the amount of energy that's consumed in this building type, because it's a forensic lab is a compilation of all the different kinds of sciences, right? It has biology, where they're doing DNA investigation. It has chemistry, where they're looking at both drug identification and the toxicology within blood and other, bodily fluids. They're looking from the physical sciences, where they're doing firearms investigation and latent print, fingerprint lifting. So plus there's a whole administrative component, right? As well. On top of that, you have all the evidence that's being submitted to the lab. And it's no minor feat to be able to manage all those things coming into the building and maintaining what's referred to as the chain of custody, so that you can secure the building. So already in a forensic lab, you have all these challenges, and then you're going to say, well, make the building platinum. Can you do that? Or net zero, right? So then you have all of those challenges. But it does take a great team like yourself, the architects, the engineers, the lab consultants, all working together to identify the opportunities, to do the research that's necessary so that the right solutions are being applied to the facility, and the facility can still maintain its integrity and its purpose for what it is being designed for. Again, the facility that we did just outside of Kansas City, in the end was achieving more than a 53% energy savings at the end of the year. So we were able to reduce that consumption by greater than half of the amount of energy that it takes in that building. And yeah, there are lots of opportunities with, utilizing natural light that not only allows for that natural kind of heat gain and thermal products of the building, but also allows for incredible views and vistas for the scientists to pull their head up out of their work and get some eye relief by refocusing on something different than just their work. So that kind of human factor condition is very important to us. We're taking that into consideration down from, the right height to work at a lab bench. Is it standing? Is it sitting? What's the reach and the ergonomics of the space? What's the visual issues? What's the odor issues? What's the noise issues? And we're looking at all of those. And as Jinhee mentioned, particularly in this platinum forensic project, weighing all those pros and cons and looking at unique ideas and challenges, and sometimes for the first time being utilized by a specific agency, right? It was their first platinum building. They had done lots of silvers and they'd done some golds, but this was their first platinum building. And so pushing the envelope and reassuring them of reliable systems was, just as important to them, being able to maintain the building, make the building maintenance hassle-free, operational, removing, roadblocks that way as well, was just as important as providing a great forensic facility.
And it's so great to see from the client side that they trust the designers, right, to deliver this type of project. So let's talk a little bit about passing the baton. I would love to hear from both Taisha and Jinhee, and Jinhee on the designing side, and then Taisha on the planning side. When you're working on planning and designing a lab, where is the point? Where does the transition happen? Jinhee, if you could go first, from your work to the architects and engineers.
Sure. There's no baton hanging over. Like Kim mentioned, I think this work, and Alicia, you as being a consultant, and you're same thing too. It takes a village to have the project completed, right? Yeah. So our work essentially starts from the programming, and we represent the user side and we communicate with them because all of us are trained to speak their language, specifically science language. And then we're also trained to speak architectural and engineering language. And because we live in a both world, we never stop. Design side, we're always hands-on with them. And if the architect says A, then we have to say, what about A, B, C? And if the engineers start talking in their own language, then we have to speak, oh, what about CFM, ACH? We just start talking to them in their own language, right?
Yeah.
Even though our initial transition, handing over the baton, actually starts in design development, we never stop. We could pretty much cut the ribbon and say, okay, Mr. Engineer, this is the transition. You need to take it from here. But HERA as a team, because we believe in holistic design, we kind of refuse to do that. I remember being in one of the largest project. It's like a $80 million project, and I was on the call with one of the principals and the engineers, and here I am and doing the calculation for the duct size and where the route of the duct. And my principal looked at me like, did you just get an engineering degree? And I was like, yes, I think I did, honorary degree. You see, so because we believe in holistic design, we know what causes the failure of the engineering side, and we don't want that. And we know that certain ventilation systems, we know for sure you can't ventilate out at directly above the fume hoods and stuff, right? So we want to route it, and we want to be as controlling as possible with the limitation, right? So I don't want to use the word handing over the baton, but I like to use the word collaboration with the engineers and architect, definitely for sure. And Taisha can talk to you about the planning side.
Maybe it's a tug of war.
Yeah, it's always been a true tug of war with the engineers, and
for a good cause.
Yes, but and I know that several of engineers whom I love to work with, I think they absolutely hate me because they call me that I'm a control freak, but from my perspective, or at least from HERA perspective, we have to control where these, the ductwork is gonna go, and also we're addressing the human factors, right?
Yeah,
so why not like put a little color to the ductwork? And engineers hate it.
I think if you're using the track analogy of handing the baton, that's interesting because it's teamwork, right? If you're doing a relay race, there is teamwork. However, I think in Jinhee's analysis of that teamwork, she starts the race and she hands the baton to the architect or the engineer, but she doesn't stop her leg of the race. She continues to run with them the whole time, helping them along, coaching them along, and making sure that the next handoff happens successfully. And then she's with that person running them along until the race is finished, all the way through. Yeah.
So it's one baton shared all the way.
That's
and holding on to it all the way until the end of the race, when we have to finally give it over to the client.
Yes, that would be at the ribbon cutting. Yes.
Yes.
And you hand it over to the client. Okay, this is yours.
That's right.
Yes.
Maintain
and the planning portion goes hand in hand with the design as well, because he's still planning in the beginning and he's still planning as you go throughout the process as well. So I'm holding the baton with Jinhee all the way with the engineers until we finish.
It's very calculating, intentional calculations of, okay, when does we hand it back to each other, right? It just keeps going, I think, and with a side runner.
Yes.
That's right.
Oh, that's great. No, it's a very interesting and complex type of design, but it's great. I have a one last question for all of you. What got you into forensic lab design? I'd love to hear from each of you how you got into this space. Ken, do you want to go first?
I could
Taisha, go ahead.
I could tell you personally that as an architect, you know, when we go into places, we stop looking at things as a normal person and look at it as an architect. So when you go into the doctor's office, or when you watch the shows on TV, you're like, wow, how does that work? And so when I got into lab planning and I heard about the crime lab, I was like, ooh, that should be interesting to participate in. And so heard about HERA doing crime lab, and I was like, I want to join in and see what that's about.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'd have to say that when I started in forensic science and doing this kind of programming and planning for this facility type, prior to my arrival into the industry, it was being done by hospital planners and academic school planners. And occasionally they would be, you know, confronted with a forensic facility. And it's definitely a different mindset, and there are definitely different solutions. That's why, you know, if you haven't ever planned a clinical lab, you shouldn't really take your experiences wholeheartedly from a totally different lab type and then just apply them to clinical lab, because there are certain vocabulary that is going to be missed and not translated properly into that completed facility. And so on the forensic side, when we started doing this project type more purposefully, we hyper-focused on it. We identified some issues that were happening in the forensic industry that really weren't being explored. Now, taking the best of lessons learned from R&D and clinical labs and academic labs, yes, that's appropriate. And taking those lessons learned and trying to translate and provide them into the forensic world, that's what we were doing. So we were really reshaping how forensic science was being translated into the built environment through all the lessons learned of other project types. And now what's it been? Something like 24 years we've been doing forensic facilities around the globe, introducing them to everything from modular planning to human factors conditions to improve sustainability issues in those 24 years. It's been quite a exciting project type.
Very fascinating. What about you, Jinhee? What brought you to this space?
So my journey is a little bit more complex, but I'll give you a condensed version. So I actually grew up in South Korea until I was 12. So, you know, when I was growing up, my dad was heavily influenced on my life, just because he was a machine engineer, and we lived in a Seoul where the building, you know, like it's a mixed use building. So upstairs, that's where we lived, and downstairs was his factory and the offices and stuff. And watch him growing up. So as I launched into this field, my interest for architecture grew, and when I saw one day, I looked at a lab, just a science lab. And that's when I realized, it's like, why is this lab? It looks like it's stuck in 1950s or even 1900s. I don't understand. It looks like a jail. And then that's when that's right. Like, and if I pull up a Thomas Edison, his lab from 1900s, I kid you not, it looks like a lab from today. And when I approached Ken, and he's like, you're right, it is stuck in 1900s. We just don't know why this has been deriving. And also being raised from a Korean family and, very poor, I learned to stretch $1 into so many different ways. And that's how I like to apply all my projects. How do we stretch $1 into every project, but deliver a beautiful project with bringing the quality of life into the science and scientists? Because as you know, that I like when I grew up in Seoul, microwave is a big thing. I know that this is really funny, and and we had a TV that was a black and white, and I know some of my colleagues laugh about it. And in the 80s, I know we had a fax machine. And like, as you can see, the evolution of a science is evolving like blink of an eye. And we have iPhone, and now someone is inventing something new. We don't know. But the science is evolving very, very quickly. But the environment that we have designed for these scientists to test these ideas are stuck in 1900s without giving them a good quality of a life. And that's where I start thinking about into really in depth, and that dragged me into HERA. So.
Very nice. No, I love that. Anytime that you can have a solution and it's economical, I'm all for that. We have a saying in Spanish that goes just like that. It's bueno, bonito y barato. It means good, beautiful, and functional. And economical, sorry. So when you can find that little gem that's just like economical and it's beautiful and it's functional, then you have all three. Check, check, check.
That's right.
That's great.
Yeah, thank you once again. I just love having all three of you here talk about forensic labs, and I will see you again very soon. As we continue on this another forensic lab. And next week in 2 weeks I will be talking to Carol Ross Barney, who we're all working with as well, and we're going to be talking about net zero projects and her flagship McDonald's that her firm designed. So stay tuned. The conversation continues, and have a wonderful, wonderful, healthy day.
Thank you so much for having us.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you.